I appreciate you taking the time, Mr. Ford. So
My
we'll
pleasure.
just dive into the first question. So, obviously we have our current demonstrations or current protests still happening nationwide and locally. Of course, Tom Roberts, the assembly member, kind of mentioned having a special legislative session to specifically talk about reforms in policing, reforms when it comes to police accountability in law enforcement. Where are we right now when it comes to, legislation or taking action in regards to that?
Well, I think in addition to Mr. Roberts making that request, I think Speaker Frierson has made it clear that to the extent he has the ability to make that request and to make it happen, he's also interested in seeing a special session related to these issues. And as you know, I have started a series called Justice and Injustice, where on yesterday I had Speaker Frierson as well as Mr. Roberts on the phone, on the screen, and we talked about this very issue. I think that there were a lot of ideas that were put out on the table during yesterday's conversation that will be considered legislatively. Obviously, I'm not in the legislature anymore, so I don't have the ability to make promises in that regard. But I'm confident that a lot of the ideas that were presented yesterday, as well as others that will come up between now and any session, whether it's a special session or the regular session in February, will be given to consideration.
Absolutely. Was there perhaps any ideas coming out of those talks that there might be appetite to take action, at least legislatively, from what you were seeing?
Well, listen, I can tell you what I hope for. I won't, again, purport to speak on what appetite the legislature has on these issues because I'm not a member of the legislature anymore. But, I have made a specific request that they consider authorizing the Attorney General's office to do what we call pattern and practice investigations into local police departments who have been alleged to have discriminatory interactions with particular populations. Right now, the federal government has given it authority to the Department of Justice. We've also, I and 17 other attorneys general across the nation have sent a letter to Congress asking that they, under that same federal statute, afford us that authority. But irrespective of whether they do or not, the state legislature could do that, and we could have some oversight authority in that regard. I'd also like to talk further about some of the suggestions related to de-escalation training. I know some of our police departments have, in fact, already implemented those, but better training and ensuring that those things are being followed, I think, are important. And there are the duty to intervene, for example, that Chief Soto is introducing into Reno now. I think it's a great idea. It sounds like it's common sense, but it's clearly something that is being considered now because it's not part of the policies. And so those are some of the ideas that I would think we should consider on a going forward basis.
Of course, and obviously here locally in Las Vegas, we have Metro Police bringing out their updated use of force policy that was implemented obviously during the COVID, shortly before what happened to George Floyd. Do you believe, statewide, when it comes to, de-escalation policies, the use of body cameras, where do you see them compared to, say, like other states? Is Nevada kind of ahead of the game when it comes to that?
Well, frankly, I don't compare us to other states. I compare us to yesterday. I want to know where Nevada is respective to Nevada yesterday. And I think we've made some progress. We are nowhere where we need to be, however. We have to continue to improve ourselves. I have said time and time again that the three communities that exist are those that have complete trust in government, those who had trust and have lost some trust in government, and those who don't have any trust in government. And so in law enforcement, we have to ensure that we augment trust where it exists, that we restore it where it's been diminished, and that we create it where it's never existed in the first place. And so as far as I'm concerned, we need to continue to operate in that particular prism and continue to improve ourselves.
Of course. And being that you are here Nevada's top law enforcement official, being the Attorney General, do you feel there's kind of a sense of responsibility to, at least, possibly take some action, per se? And I see that you're doing that, signing on with the 17 other Democratic attorneys general to get that power to investigate police departments if there is some sort of questionable use of force, per se.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think in my position as top law enforcement officer in the state, and also as a Black man, I have an opportunity to utilize that intersection to be able to speak specifically to this issue and to try to move progress, to progress our state forward in that area. And I've attempted and I've endeavored to do that. I want to be able to help, and I hope that these conversations are helpful. But as I've also said, the time for conversing is over. It's time for implementing actual plans that are going to improve relationships between law enforcement and the communities that they serve.
Of course. Last few questions. Being that you are having direct conversations with members of your own party and also members of the Republican Party as well, what does that tell you that, basically it's a bipartisan discussion going?
So listen, I think unfortunately the George Floyd killing has provided us yet another opportunity to progress forward. One of the differences that we've seen already is that law enforcement almost immediately came out and condemned what the officers did to Mr. Floyd, and I think that's evidence of the fact that we are in fact progressing. A lot of my friends and family, a lot of my friends are reaching out to me and my family members, offering condolences and thoughts on these issues. And I think that that's a step forward in that regard. The fact that we have a bipartisan conversation yesterday, I think is also proof positive of the fact that we're moving forward. And to their credit, Senator Keffer and Assemblyman Roberts reached out to me specifically and directly on their own volition to ask that they be included in these conversations. So I think it's important to note that we have Republicans and Democrats, we have law enforcement, we have civilians, all coalescing around this notion that we need to improve relationships between law enforcement and the communities that they serve, and in particular in this context, the African American community.
Absolutely, absolutely. And then when it comes to specifically the request you made to the DOJ along with the other Democratic attorneys generals, do you this act, I understand, will not only hold police accountable, but can also exonerate police if the use of force is deemed appropriate per se.
Absolutely.
Talk a little bit about that.
So let me qualify. Let me clear up something though. This isn't a request that the 18 of us made to the DOJ. We made this request to Congress to afford us the powers that the DOJ currently has. I want to make that clear. But yes, absolutely. The pattern and practice investigations not only can uncover bad practices that are discriminatory, but it could exonerate a department by indicating that, in fact, maybe there's one or two instances of folks who need to be dealt with, but it is not a pervasive issue that permeates the entirety of the organization. These, I think, are appropriate, just as they were for the body camera approach. When I advocated for the passage of body cameras in 2015 and expanded the use of body cameras in 2017, it wasn't just so that we could say, so that a civilian can say that, yeah, this cop beat me. It was also so that the cop could say, I did not beat the civilian. What we've seen is that the body camera usage has dropped the number of complaints against law enforcement officers, probably on both sides, because some folks would be lying, and then sometimes the cops would be misbehaving. We've seen all of that decrease, and understanding why, I think is important.
Absolutely. And last question, lastly, where do you hope this conversation goes? It seems like obviously we're going to have some form of special legislative session because of our current situation, the coronavirus, the budget, obviously lots of discussion. It seems like it's anticipated at this point, but where do you hope this conversation will go, especially for the people out there who are demonstrating, who are protesting, and want to see some sort of change, especially when it comes to at the legislative level, or at the government level, where actual change could actually happen?
Listen, I want my sons. I raised 3 sons and a nephew, and I want Jason Frierson's son, and I want all sons of Black parents to see some justice and some progress on this issue. But beyond that, I want the entirety of society to be able to wrap their minds around the fact that this injustice is in fact an injustice and it needs to be remedied. So by instituting legislation that we've talked about, for example, on yesterday, I think that's again proof positive of progress in that regard. But beyond legislation, I'd like to see the voluntary implementation of policies like we're seeing Chief Soto do, for example. Like I know Chief Andres down in Henderson is making an effort to do, that we know Metro, when they invited in the DOJ to look at their practice and policies, began to do as well. So as much as possible, I want us to be able to see tangible results from this conversation that demonstrate that this country, and that particularly this state, is moving forward in the relationships and improving relationships between law enforcement and the communities that they serve.
Absolutely. Well, thank you very much, Mr. Ford, for speaking with me today.